who 5:30
Who has to
is.
sneak at 6 o'clock?
Who has
usually- oh,
to be
right.
elsewhere.
I believe it's 6. So
No, I know, we usually start at 5:30, so you
Right.
leave at 6, now it's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Dan is coming, but we knew he would be
He comes late.
Yeah.
It
because
worked for him, so.
he's in Kingston, and
He
so,
works till 5 or whatever.
right, so he was gonna try and get here. Welcome, Jason.
Yeah, I changed mine
Yeah,
too.
really give it to me. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah,
Okay,
I didn't know you were coming, Jason. I wasn't.
just
Would have made sure to do it then.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Okay. First and foremost, Susan, why don't you introduce to everybody?
Okay, Harry with the camera, Henriette back there, Susan over there, producers who are looking to do a potential documentary about New Paltz, who are here, they've been filming all day, and they'll be filming all week, and they're going to a lot of the key meetings, and they're gonna show how wonderful New Paltz is.
And it is.
It is wonderful, I know,
Yes,
it is wonderful,
okay.
and,
Alright, let's keep the self-indulgent boosters moving.
Would you like to invite them to Wednesday night, Jason?
Hey, anyone is free to come Wednesday night.
We have a village board meeting
I
on
already told them,
Wednesday
I
night.
already told them.
If you would like to, at 7:30 here,
Oh, do
if
you?
you would like to join us.
So which one's gonna be more controversial, the school board or the village board?
Oh, that's true.
You should know, we have archives in the library indicating that what you're gonna see right now is exactly what the 12 Huguenot families were doing for you.
Thank you.
Is
Exactly.
that
Okay.
fighting?
It's in Heidegger,
So let's,
and they were all of one religion, so that's even weirder. So, nonetheless,
we have a lot of ground to cover, so why don't we try and move quickly so that we can avail ourselves of Rick's expertise while he can still be with us. First thing, minutes. Are
Oh,
there,
shoot.
you all have the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? I have one, and that was that we agreed that Terry, from the attorney for the fire department, would come to a joint village board meeting, town meeting, to speak on fire districts.
But we said we
I
would
think
find
I
out if he could
Yeah.
come.
wrote that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
they said he
Well,
could,
so-
they-
Well,
but
but they didn't have, I don't think it was that definite.
No, no,
That's all right.
what does it say, Sally?
it doesn't
I
say
wrote that,
anything.
that he offered, no, it did.
Yeah,
No,
he
it
offered.
was. I wrote
Yeah.
fire,
And we're gonna set it up.
He offered to have Terry Hannigan, the attorney engaged by the fire company, advised the fire district issues, to meet with both boards for further discussion.
And they did,
Yeah.
they
Pretty
absolutely
much-
did, they did
Yeah.
offer.
Cover it?
They did
Yes.
offer.
So we don't
They
need
did.
to.
And so
Yeah.
we need, okay.
you need
We'll
more-
discuss that,
I don't
but they
think we
did
need more
offer.
specificity.
Okay.
That's
And
way
then we
before
also
minutes.
agreed that we would work on a pros and cons list
Check
to
it
offer
out.
up.
Okay,
Sally.
that agreement may have
Okay.
actually been omitted. That was late in the meeting, right?
Yeah,
That
it
close
was
to
very
the
late,
close,
things
okay.
were getting a little hectic. Motion to approve the minutes as corrected,
So move.
and a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
They're abstained since I wasn't.
That's a good idea.
Okay. I want to thank Carol Conley for sending out to everybody who might not have had it, the consolidation, Article 17A. If you haven't seen it, it is on your computer. Okay, now, here's where we are. We agreed that Plan B is a viable alternative with some tweaking, and we agreed to recommend a vote at the 2014, or to recommend to the joint boards a vote at the 2014 general election. Okay, that being said,
Point of information. We had a discussion, which I recorded in the minutes, but at no time did we actually take a vote and arrive at that we were concluding that Plan B was viable and that we would be recommending it. In fact, I have certain specifics that Jerry Benjamin mentioned about 3 different options that we could forward to the joint boards, and we didn't select one of those 3. It
Not
was
yet.
just brought up as a, so, but you're now reporting that we agreed that Plan B
This-
is viable, but we've never actually explored anything contained within Plan B to know that we can affirm that. So I'm a little confused.
all right, before you joined us, Steve, and I think at the meeting that you attended and you hadn't been asked if you would like to be a part, we agreed that Plan B was viable. We have been discussing the 9 things and the 9 questions that were posed in September that Peter found out the answers to. Okay.
Susan, do you have a different view on one of those things? I see your mouth starting to open to say something, so.
Well, I'm letting whoever wants to talk. But we did agree that option 2 was viable and that we would start to explore that option. We knew that there were issues relative to
They have
Plan
to
B
be
that we had
answered.
to talk about. We took a straw poll about wanting to move forward and asked the 2 boards to put something up for a vote at some point shortly, but we never actually, Steve's right in the sense that we never did a formal motion in terms of saying we'll use November, that we'll put a referendum up on November and the town will be the referendum. But it was a general conversation and we
Yes.
all were moving in that direction.
All right.
But we never did a formal motion, so Steve's
So do you
right.
want to do a formal motion?
I would prefer first to talk about some of these things. Why don't you just continue?
All right.
Well, we're waiting to hear from Dan.
What they're looking
I'm not ready to do a formal motion until Dan gets here with his list of
That's
pros and
right.
cons.
Well, we're gonna have to do
Time out,
that.
Jason.
We
Some other
could
things as
start.
well.
Carol might have an extra copy. Carol, do you have more of what you handed out?
Well, I printed up 8 this afternoon.
Yes, so
But I
I
can-
have a photocopier in my office.
we can share, we can share. We
even
looked
that.
at it. There's not that much on it, Jason, and we looked at
Take
it.
that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can share.
and we really, for our purposes, Jason, start at item number 4, as Rick pointed out, because nobody is doing petitions. So
As
it
as
is,
far as we know.
All
Anyone
this-
could, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just want to understand the structure. Any citizen could.
sure.
if it
oh,
chose to. Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
And there are
But,
rumblings.
I mean,
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
But also, if I can just clarify, obviously you know that people can carry petitions to dissolve the village. People can carry petitions to annex the town into the village. But then in the new consolidation citizen empowerment plan, the town outside the village and the village residents can both carry petitions, but the petitions have to say the same thing. And then, so this way they give it to the town, to the town, they give it to the village, and then the 2 boards have to act
Could
to
we
move forward.
dissolve each other and just become part of Gardner?
You know what? Quite. No, I think actually, Jason.
I suppose
Oh, Lord.
technically
No,
we could have 2,
but,
You have to have Jason. People go to Lloyd, to
I'm
Rosendale,
joining
and to
Tilson. I
Gardner.
don't know where you guys go.
you could have 2 referendums on the ballot as far as
Well,
that
there was that
goes.
Village of
You could if you had
Armageddon.
enough signatures.
given where we are and what we were asked to do, August 15th by the 2 boards, this committee is being asked to review what we had originally recommended, which is no longer viable, and to determine whether Plan B, which was the second option, is viable for what we believe are the needs of the community. And that is what we are trying to do. So a petition for this committee
That's
is
not our issue. No, of
it's
course
not our issue.
Of course
So
not.
that's why Rick is correct that we start at number 4.
Yeah, well, actually, the town and village boards would start number 4, because we just recommend to them.
Right.
I think maybe where we are and maybe where we need to straighten out before we go further is trying to come up with a definition of the word viable that we can all agree that we're going to work with. For
Environment?
example,
Viable.
Viable.
Oh, viable.
Dr. Benjamin mentioned last week when we were discussing the 3 possibilities of what could be recommended forward to both boards, that the only thing we know for a fact right now is that Plan B is legal. We know that it's legal and we know that it's not going to jeopardize the grant. That's all we know. And so I want to make sure that we're using the word viable to mean that we know that it's legal and that it won't jeopardize the grant, and that we're not extending the definition of that word to say that we know at this table that it's a money saver, that it's a bureaucracy saver, or anything. Viable literally just in it can be done. That's kind of a little step
Yeah.
below saying we,
Well, but Steve,
that
you
it should be
sometimes
done.
mix 2 things up.
Are you going up or down? Are you going here or are you going down?
And the 2 things that you're mixing up is, what this committee was asked to reconvene to do. Okay? And this committee was not asked, nor is it possible for this committee to make any decisions for the joint boards. All we can do is make a recommendation.
Right, well,
And the
that's,
two joint boards, the joint boards have to decide, and there are certain things that this committee would never be able to do that only the joint boards can do if they accept our recommendation at all.
that's a little bit off the point of what I'm trying to bring up. What I'm trying to bring up is that this committee, before I joined it, spent a tremendous amount of time working on structural details and as best as possible financial details about a structure of a consolidation that turned out couldn't take place. Okay, you were recommending that that happen, you then found out afterwards that it couldn't take place.
Well,
Now let me just finish the thought, please. Now we're falling back to a Plan B position, but none of those things have been done for the Plan B. So I don't think, this is why I was suggesting, I don't think we're just one meeting away from concluding. There's no numbers on that. There's nothing quantified to let people know how many government, we already know that despite the fact that the $1 million isn't jeopardized because the state doesn't consider a fire district a municipality, just as an example, we know that realistically, it does involve a separate election, 5 new officials, an auditor, a budget. So we haven't done, we may actually be increasing the amount of bureaucracy with this recommendation rather than reducing it. We may be increasing cost, not reducing it, or we may not be. The point I'm making is that we haven't worked any of that out yet. So we can't tell either board affirmatively that we believe that this plan is going to be a bureaucracy or cost saver or efficiency creator or anything of the kind, because on the surface right now it doesn't really appear to be that, aside from the accessing the $1 million. So
I think.
I don't agree with
we
you,
haven't
Steve.
held
Can
those
I just
conversations.
interrupt for a second? I just want to say one little quick thing, and it's only just to correct the statement that Steve made in a sense, because I'll keep going back. We keep saying that and again, I wasn't involved in the efficiency committee, it was before I came back or whatever. Everybody has to be clear, what the efficiency committee did not recommend something that was quote illegal or can't be done. The two boards chose not to go down that path because right now there's no mechanism for both town outside the village and the village to have a vote at the same time. It has to be either the town outside the village voting to annex or the village deciding to, to dissolve. So it's not that what they did was illegal or whatever, it's just the mechanism to get there. We've as a community chosen not to go down, and that's, I just want to,
Okay,
it's
I'm
a
with
subtle
you on
difference,
that.
but
I'm just saying
it sort of insults the
whichever
work
way
of
it
that committee, yeah.
Whichever way it went,
Yeah.
it resulted in us being
Yes,
where
I
we
agree
are
with you.
now, and
I
it
agree
doesn't
with you.
change the fact that we didn't redo that work to reflect Plan B.
I agree with you
So-
wholeheartedly. I just think it's unfair to the work of the committee that I was not on.
No, I didn't mean to imply that.
That's
I
all.
didn't mean
I'm
to
just,
imply
I
that.
just
But
want to, they worked in good faith
The
and.
resolution
Right.
that's before us contains very specific recommending language, and we never did the work to make that recommending language possible. So
Want
I'm
to speak to this?
a little,
Do you want to speak? When
Well-
the efficiency committee,
I was gonna say, I don't see any reason, and maybe I'm blind, but I don't see any reason why the work that was done by the subcommittees and all that stuff, that was the basis, the foundation for the other recommendation, why that should all be thrown out and start from scratch. I don't think there's anything invalid about those studies.
but the structure is going to be completely different than what you were expecting when you wrote those studies.
It's not really, Steve, I don't
Yes,
think.
well, just by the matter of fire, this is
Or the fire,
elected officials, expense, it's never
Okay,
been calculated,
Steve.
it should be.
Steve, when the efficiency committee did their study, they looked at many things, okay, including Plan B. So in that way, you are wrong, and Plan B is clearly one of the options that we studied.
But you
Okay.
never calculated its
Sal,
cost.
Oh, sure.
No, just, I want to see the page that you're holding up.
You never calculated its cost, how many officers would have to
that-
be elected, how many audits would have to be done to that structure. That work's never been
Steve.
done.
That is not the work of the committee. That is the work of the joint boards, who, once they receive the recommendation of this committee, then proceed down the path, either accepting or rejecting those things which this committee can recommend, but fiscal policy, legal questions to be answered. This committee does not have the financial backing, if you will. We do not have an attorney. we never were supposed to have an attorney other than Mr. Batson, who was part of the,
State Department,
hmm?
from the state.
From the state. And so there are issues, and I don't disagree with you. There are real questions that need to be answered by the joint boards. One of them being, do they want a fire? We can say, as a committee, we recommend a fire district. But the two boards determine whether that is something they are going to include. They are the legal binding body. And they may decide to have the fire improve,
There's a fire protection district.
Right.
fire
district.
protection district. We can make a recommendation.
Based on what? You haven't met with Terry Hannigan or Chief McGuire? We haven't done that work here.
No,
That's
we
my
haven't.
point.
I think-
What I'm saying is that if we were going to forward something to the joint boards, it would have to eliminate all those whereases that are on the thing and just do what Dr. Benjamin was saying 2 weeks ago, which is to say we've determined that it's doable and that we're going to put a lot of the actual work to determine the structure and the cost in the hands of the boards and take it away from the committee. Carol actually 2 weeks ago objected to that. She thought the committee should do more of the work. So that's kind of where we left things 2 weeks ago. But all those whereases that are in the resolution, the way it came to us in the attachment, we didn't do any work with which we could honestly affirm that we agree that those whereases are correct. So why would we vote to adopt it?
If I can just step in for a second, I think where the problem is and the disconnect, as I sort of somewhat see it, is it's really a matter of, you're 100% right, Steve, in the sense of a lot of the, putting the plan together and presenting a plan has not been done. But there's been a lot of work that's been done, whether it's been through your efficiency committee, whether it's been through the subcommittees. There's been an incredible amount of work done, but nothing's ever been put together as a plan for the two boards to adopt, to say we'd like to put it up for referendum. So I think in a sense where we're at in a crossroads right now is you've got right now an efficiency committee that's not the two boards. And I think from Sally's perspective, and I think from some other board members on this committee, that there's a feeling of, well, they were charged to decide if we could we consolidate, and if so, how could we move forward. So what Sally's saying is she feels that, and if I'm wrong, please interrupt,
Okay.
that this committee believes that Plan B, as presented, is a viable option. And so what I think Sally is saying is she would like to sort of say, okay, two boards, we believe Plan B is viable. We believe that the community should have the right to have a vote. And so we're handing it off to you to now do the work. How the two boards then take it to put together the work that needs to be done, that you're identifying, is exactly right. It all has to be done. The question is who has to
does
do
it?
it. Now, me and Sally might disagree. I might agree with you that this committee should keep doing it. Sally and other people on this committee sort of feel like they're already done and they want to, hand it off kind of thing.
Might
So,
need new volunteers if that's the case. They're
Well,
willing
if
to
I
do
might-
something that's not
Go
really
ahead,
been done.
Look, that's my
not that I'm running the meeting,
Oh,
but Jason wants to talk. Can you
If I
recognize
might,
him?
There's one, unless I'm misunderstanding some of the terminology. So I've been reading the emails, but I haven't been at the meeting conference. Plan B is dissolving the village.
No,
I'm looking at the highlighted one on this.
It's a little more complex than that, but that's a fundamental
Okay,
component
so
of it.
it's not my
Yes.
important point. Basically we would have a single town. Is
A
the end
consolidated
result.
town, right, with no village.
We spent 2 years, 3 years, and still don't know how much that would cost. And that's the one thing that's going to be a problem for me, is that there are more economic factors than the state grant, which is not, I know it's nice shorthand, but it's not getting $1 million. It's up to $1 million with certain conditions to it. There are other facets that came out during the past 3 years which haven't been accounted for. The loss of grant money to the village, or $600,000 a year in CDBG sewer money, which would be gone. And we just simply don't know what it's going to cost. We don't know the transitional costs, the time frame that I've seen of 2 years to get all of our codes, what's the word?
Aligned.
Collated, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's laughably overstated. I mean, think of how long it takes us to pass a single local law at the town or village. It can take 2 or 3 years for one law. And now we're talking about basically looking through line by line 2 sets of code books, which are each several hundred pages long. because we can't have any contradictions. I mean, and then if there are contradictions, there's the inevitable lawsuits, which are hard to budget for, but should be at least added in as maybe a margin of error, whatever, however we want to talk about it. I'm not saying this work is insurmountable, but I think it has not been done. It certainly hasn't been done in a format and a manner in which I think the public could trust the numbers to cast their ballots. And I think it was Steve who said this, I think that if this committee is the group of people in the community who really are excited about this public policy project, which is what it is, then I think it's this committee's responsibility to do as much of that scientifically based work rather than best case scenario work before it even gets to the joint boards. Because if not, what's going to happen is we're going to repeat what we've done the past 2 years, which is the joint boards are going to get this project handed to us, and amid all the 4 dozen things that each of the boards are dealing with, this gets put basically back to a committee that was going to be made up of this group of people, and we may even get to the point of having those 10 groups again that we had to look at Plan B, and yet that didn't work. That didn't produce the hard data that we needed to make a decision as a community. I mean, and you all know I'm being neutral here. I'm personally, on its face, I think this is a bad move for the community, but I don't have the data to know if I've been proven wrong or not yet, if that makes sense. So I think I support the idea that this group of people, as the most passionate, as the most well-read, as the most engaged, as the people who know the process better than anybody, should be the ones who are at least sketching out the outlines and answering every question that can be answered. And just a kind of a footnote point about lawyers, I know our prior village attorney had requested to be copied on all of this. I do know that our current village attorney would be happy to review any of the documents. We have them on retainer, as you guys have Joe on the retainer.
No, we don't.
Oh, you don't have on retainer?
No.
Oh, well then never
That's
mind.
why we use your lawyer
We'll
as
have
much
the
as we
village
can.
attorney- we'll have the village attorney do it.
Well, there's an efficiency right there.
All right, so I'll end fat. I'll end quickly. This is the last sentence. This is the last sentence.
A lawyer on retainer.
With all of the stuff that I just tried to dump on this group of people, there are resources available that I think more than we think. I think we could refer to the village attorney on questions. We could refer to the village engineer on questions, the town engineer on questions. I think we have some resources, and I think this group would be more efficient, to pardon the phrase, simply because it's not a group of 10 politicians live on camera. It's a group of people doing the grunt work of policy writing. So that's my 10 cents.
And I want to address that because I think you've raised a very good point. And I think right now, I would say that for this committee to continue and to do what Steve is saying and what you are saying, then I think the committee needs to know from the joint boards that they are willing, if we do the work, they are willing to put this issue before the voters, because 2.5 years were spent by the efficiency committee trying to do the best that we could, coming up with thinking out of the box, and obviously we thought out of the box and made a recommendation which
Was
the
out.
state,
There was no box.
well, beside the state,
Wrong board.
you know,
Anyway.
there wasn't the sense of collaboration or togetherness in getting something accomplished, because there are people, for very good reasons, who don't want this to occur. So the only way, at least I personally, and I don't know about the rest of the committee, would even dream of continuing to do what Steve is recommending and you're recommending, is if at Thursday night's joint board meeting, the town and village board say together, by majority, we do want to offer the consolidation vote to this community, and we're asking the efficiency committee to come up with all of the data that will support this. Then I would be game.
What about this wrinkle to this? And this will be the last. I won't talk for a while.
All right.
Just if you wouldn't
Sure.
No, I think that the fact that you're here, Jason, and that you're willing to engage with us, I think you should talk as much as you need to talk because we're
I
not-
finished a lot of work this weekend. So I got time.
So,
And
so
you don't
please,
wanna
I want
say
to listen.
that.
I want to
You
listen.
really don't
but
wanna
I want
say
to hear what I want to hear what you have to say.
I didn't
All
bring
right,
my
so
sleeping bag.
Here's my counter to that point. To say to the joint boards, this work can only continue if you guarantee that a referendum will be held. I think is not dangerous. I think it's an unwise precedent to set. And I'll give you I'll give you an example of something much smaller, right? We hired a planning and zoning secretary named Brogan. She's got her planning degree. She's new. She's a great hire. Everyone's excited to have her. She came up to me the other night, a couple weeks ago outside, and kind of nervous, and said, "Would it be okay if I wrote a overlay district law that would allow for permaculture in the village?" And I told her, "Don't even ask me. If you have an idea for the village, write the law. I'll get it on the village board agenda, and we'll see what the board thinks." So I think that is a wiser course in terms of new policy, because to require a referendum before we know the quality of the question or the quality of the consequences, I think is unfair to the boards. I think I think it's completely fair to say this group is going to come up with a proposal, and it's, whatever it is, like the way we wrote the wetlands law when you were supervisor, Carol. The ENCC wrote it. We did the work. We wrote the law, presented it to the town board, but we didn't expect them to vote. If it's good policy, we'll vote on it. If it's good policy, we'll set the referendum. If it's not good policy, being locked into a referendum with a bad set of data, I think is unwise.
Okay, I'm going to say two things to you. Go back to your Brogan example. Okay. Brogan came to you. Brogan is not, she's just Brogan.
Yeah.
Okay? And she came to you and she said, "I have an idea." And you said, "Great, I support it. Go do it." She at
No, he didn't
least
say that.
had
I didn't
the
say I supported
support.
the idea. I
No,
supported
he didn't say
her
that.
presenting something to the board.
Right.
On her own initiative.
But my point is this,
Yeah.
we presented, after 2.5 years of study and work, a proposal to the two boards. And it has been, nobody said, let's go back and now start doing, which we did. We took the suggestion that we needed study committees. This is the two boards now, that we needed study committees, and we wanted to hear how we could refine this to meet this community's needs. And quite frankly, now I'm going to put another hat on, as a village board member, I don't think the two boards were ever given, nor did they demand, the time to discuss together the merits of the recommendations of either the efficiency committee or the recommendations of the study committees. So to ask people to do more when you know you're going to vote no, to me is really disenfranchising people, and it is not effective. So my point is this: after 2.5 years of working on this topic with the efficiency committee making a recommendation to the two joint boards either not availing themselves or not demanding that they vote on these topics, now to say to this committee, which really is only reconvened at the request of the two boards to do one thing and only one thing, and that is to look at the other plans that we investigated. We recommended the best plan that we thought. Okay? I'll get to you, Dan. We recommended the best plan. That does not mean that we did not consider other plans. One of those plans was consolidation. Okay? We did not believe that plan would be the ideal plan for this community. We recommended a village town-wide with a village form of government and town government being coterminous, because in New York State you're required to have a town government and it would meet one day a year, put on their supervisor, the mayor would put on the supervisor's hat, and there are
get a
other
hat?
communities that have achieved this.
I will gladly give it to you.
Well, there's a black hat and a white hat, and you can trade. Whoever wants the black hat and whoever wants the. But have I pretty much summarized this, Jerry? I mean, and so to ask this committee to redo work is just, I don't think, a viable option, because our charge from the joint boards was, okay, we can't do the ideal that we recommended. For whatever reason, it's not possible. So, will you go back and look at the other plans you considered, and are they viable? And that is our charge. And Plan B, which is the plan that we're talking about, is a consolidation of the two governments, basically putting both governments out of business as we currently know them, reconfiguring into one government, which would be a town form of government. In other words, a decentralized government instead of a centralized government, which is what we recommended. And that's what we're supposed to do. And then that's it. That was our charge.
Well, I have a problem. And Jay said you're supposed to, you're supposed to have been here. I resent having to listen to 15 minutes of what we've been doing for 2.5 years and have this explained over and over and over, and we've been to every meeting for the last 3 years. And then to have to spend time listening to this, and then, I know where you're coming from, you're allowed to say that, but I don't think we should have to explain to you for 15 minutes what we've done for the last 3 years.
You don't have to. I was there.
But she just did it. That's what I'm saying.
That was her choice.
That was her
Dan
choice.
is
There's
new
nothing to do
here,
with
and
me,
he's an
Carol.
elected official, and I'm
Nothing to do
new
with me.
here.
She can say whatever she likes.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I resent sitting here in 15 minutes and...
Then address that to Sally,
Well,
not
I
to
am
me.
too, but you should have been here along the way too, so we wouldn't have to even do this. My suggestion is that we send the thing to the, we're so deep into this and so engrossed that I think, and maybe we don't see it, we're buried too deep in it to even know what
Like
the...
forest
because
for
of-
trees thing.
So I would suggest that we send the thing to the town, to the joint boards, as we've talked about it. Let them, supposedly with fresh eyes, supposedly, see what they think the demerits are or the missing things are, and then if they think it's all beautiful and lovely, then they can adopt it. We can all go home and vote in November. If they don't like it, then they should find out what they don't like specifically, because we do have a lot of facts. You may not agree with them, but we do have a lot. And if they have fights about it or concerns about it, then tell us, and then ask us to reconvene and find out what to correct those errors or supply the best information, or do it themselves. But I don't think we're just spinning our wheels week after week, month after month, and if Jason's right and our stuff is wrong, then it's wrong.
But then you lose 4 years till
we've done what
Excuse me, Steve, do not interrupt.
We've done what we could do, or at least we think we've done what we could do, and therefore let somebody else look at it and see. I mean, if you look at it really with fresh eyes because you haven't been here, and so every.
Carol, I've been reading the emails. I'm up to date on what you've been working on.
Well, that's different from being here week after week, or month after month, and year after year. So that's, I'm not making a motion at the moment, but I'm suggesting we send the proposal and we have to hear what you have to say too.
Yep, of course.
Send the proposal at the end of the day to the joint boards, let them look at it and see what they think, and if they think it's deficient, then tell us to forget about it or redo it or work on it, whatever.
Dan
Dan's
was next.
next.
I had.
I have a fear, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this. And I would argue, and I'm not trying to sound overdramatic, but in the nearly 50 years of our community, what we're discussing is quite possibly one of the biggest things you could do to our community. It could have the greatest impact. We're restructuring the entire community as a whole. My fear is that we still don't have a number of the answers we're looking for, and I understand the notion about saying, well, we got to get this rolling, so let's say, all right, board, let's commit to a vote in order to make us do that work. At the same time, I think that we owe it to the voters to be able to have these answers to these questions. I'm not saying I'm opposed to having a vote, and I hope that we can get to a point where we can agree on facts or disagree on facts or whatever it is to say, fine, let's do this, and here, let's lay it out on the table. My problem here is that I don't think we have a lot to lay out yet. We're talking about pros or cons tonight, and at the same time we're talking about, and then we're going to ask them to get ready for a vote here. I don't think that we shouldn't necessarily say we shouldn't have a vote on this in November, but I do think it's a scary precedent to set to say, and we're going to try to lock in our boards to do that. I think that we should be able to present something to the boards. I think that that's a fair thing, and I think that a lot of people seem to agree with that.
Without any vote recommendation?
I think that we can recommend that we would like to be able to have a vote for it in November, sure. But I think that we just need to be very careful about that. And I know that I've talked to Dr. Benjamin about this many times, about how sometimes people like to slow the process for their own gains. That's not what I'm doing here. I just think it's the responsible thing to do to be able to have these answers ready. I think that we've done some good work and we're moving forward with that work, but I don't think that we should commit boards yet to votes like this.
That's a different issue, Dave, than what I think I'm trying to say. It is not, we may agree with you that we shouldn't ask them to do a November vote. That's different than saying to this committee, you do the work, okay? Much of which is not compelling to either board or both boards, okay, that they have to agree. The work really of this whole thing, including the referendum and whether it should be voted upon, is for the joint boards, and we seem to be getting mixed up with this. It is not our job, it is not this committee's job. We could have said, no, we won't reconvene, we made a recommendation to you, and that's our work and we're done. And just because the two boards can't seem to be able to collaborate together to find answers to questions, isn't the responsibility, nor was it what the grant asked to do. Okay, that's for the joint boards to do. Now, the joint boards can just say, we can make our recommendation, as Carol said, and they can say, we're not interested. That's their privilege. Okay, that is not our privilege.
We're kind of getting
Okay.
into a
Now, Ellen is
question and
next.
I haven't
response.
spoken yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good luck.
Thank you. My feeling about this can be, I suppose, summed up.
You're gonna have to be louder for
We have indeed spent 2.5 years doing this, and much of that time has been very frustrating because we haven't, I think I speak pretty much for us, our group, we have felt almost like we were sort of set over there alone to do stuff that would then get picked apart in every which way. So I don't think that I ever felt like I was kind of the work group of a positive thinking and supportive community. It was kind of like sitting here hitting our heads against the wall. And we did it with a consultant. We no longer have that consultant. And I'm hearing people say, there may be nothing different about the outside world, but you need to do more work. And I'm not willing to do that unless I know there's an end in sight, because I feel that the process, I'm not talking about people, I feel like the process has been one of ongoing disrespect for the work we've been trying to do. We didn't come in here with an agenda. We came in and tried really hard to look at the way things worked. We tried doing it creatively. We got stomped on. We got told we weren't being creative. All we got was a whole lot of negativity. So from my perspective, the reason that I agree with what Sally is saying is because I'm not going to work more on this unless I have a commitment from the deciders, our two boards, that they're serious about this, that they're open about this, and they want to participate in the process. I'm not willing to go sit in a closet and do this for 2.5 more years, especially without a consultant. Furthermore, the one piece of this that I think I feel the most angry about was that this all kind of devolved to money, to what it would cost, what it wouldn't cost, what the benefit would be, whatever. A group of people well respected in the community, not newbies, not fly-by-nights, put together what they attempted to be a moment in time. That's all they said it was, that's what they wanted it to be. At this moment in time, if we were consolidated, this is what the numbers would look like. And the questions they got asked, and the fingers that got pointed at them, I was embarrassed for our community. I really was. If we want to propose, if this group wants to propose that Plan B is what we're suggesting be the plan, we're not saying, here's Plan B, set up the referendum. We're not interested. The fact of the matter is that we know that there are still several issues to be determined. The fire department is one. We need to make sense of or peace with county-run elections and whatever that means. We need to make sense of the idea of having an appointed position for a financial manager who cannot be called the chief financial
CFO,
officer,
Chief Fiscal Officer.
but could still act in that capacity. We need to conform to 17A for consolidation law, and one of those requirements is that there be a financial impact statement. Well, I, for one, am not capable of doing a financial impact statement. And if I pretended to do it or tried to do it, I'd be the first one standing out there saying, don't listen to me. So what we're asking for is a really strong, but a really strong commitment from the two boards who will take the time to look at this, who will say, we have these 7 questions, 4 questions, or 9 questions we can make available to you, the planning department, the highway department, some amount of the village attorney's time, whatever it is, I don't care. Take 3 months, take 2 months, take 6 months, sit down and get these questions for us. But we're doing it because we're committing to you that this process will go forward. Because the one thing I hear over and over again from people who say, oh, consolidation, are we still concerned? We ever going to get to vote on that? I think the answer is yes, we need to vote on it. And we need to give the clearest, the best that we can put forward to be voted on. It will never be perfect. And it will never answer all of the questions, no matter how long we work. But unless I personally feel like there is a commitment from the two deciders, the two boards, and a timeline commitment, I don't mean in blood necessarily, but close, I'm not willing to move forward on this. And I actually am offended to be, I really feel disrespected. I don't know how else to say it.
Steve?
Turn now. Okay. When I came to this group a couple of months ago, and I met with Susan for quite some time privately also, you'll recall I was advising that I would be happy to go over the financial stuff, started from scratch to apply to Plan B and make it a realistic document. And I'm reminded of that because here to this day, this was something, those of us who were supposedly in this disrespectful attack mob, one of the questions we were asking from day one was why are the grants that are potentially going to be lost not weighed against the potential benefits on these financial documents? And here Ellen just ran through the whole thing again, and again didn't even mention that. And that's the kind of stuff that still needs to be done. As far as the time that went into it, I'm pretty sure everybody at this table, maybe except for Rick, has been on the various committees that we all get appointed to when we take an interest. Jason started out in the ENCC. I started out, in my case, after I moved here, on the Transportation Committee. Well, I spent 5 years on that committee, 5 years, not 2.5. And at the end of that process, that whole study was
I'm still on.
That study was thrown up on the shelf, not because anybody was questioning the veracity of the report or whether it would be beneficial to the community, but because 2 elected officials had held a private meeting with 2 or 3 of their donors and just decided to shelve the report. Nobody questioned whether it would improve traffic flow, whether it would make more parking available. So we all have experienced these frustrations. What this committee is facing right now is nothing new. And we've all been through it. I don't want the perception to be created here that the burden, now unlike those other earlier committees that worked for even longer periods of time and had their work completely shelved, this committee is in a very different position that I think is actually positive. This committee was told that Albany is not going to allow Plan A to proceed. And there is a Plan B, at least not the way the committee hoped it would go. I don't want to create that whole thing again. Not the way the committee hoped and intended that it would go. Would not be currently permissible under law. And that gave an opportunity to reboot the process. And the process wasn't being dismissed and thrown out like the transportation study was. It was simply being sent back to be rebooted to take a different form. If there's anybody on the committee right now that rejects the notion of doing the work that the rebooting would require to flesh out the new recommendation, I think that's a personal matter for the people that feel that way, and not a matter for the charge of the committee going forward. Hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done, and we're supposed to be able to have this without. One of the things that's been troubling me since the beginning is that I came into this process pretty much the same time you all did, although not in a committee, but just as a concerned citizen from an agnostic point of view. I announced that every time I came to a meeting. I would love to be able to support this process, but I want to see that it's going to be in my interest to do so. That was always my position. If this committee were to be operating effectively, it should have been operating kind of like the way medical researchers do a double-blind experiment, where you're looking at the information to just answer questions, not to have those answers fit a belief system. And I think, I'm hearing this reiterated right now, that there are still people talking about, people like, Sally and Ellen and Carol, who want this to happen, and Jason, who supposedly doesn't want it to happen and admits that he doesn't want it to happen, and me in the middle, and I suppose Dan, from what he's been expressing, still agnostic on the matter and just waiting for information. If this process had been done in a standard scientific double-blind kind of process from the beginning, without there being so much advocacy visible on the videotapes and in the recommendations that were coming forward, the so-called haters that came out to criticize would never have come out. I can't speak for all of them, but certainly in my case, I would never have come out. I would have had nothing to challenge, nothing to question. So, as far as getting from a procedural point of view, forget about the bad precedent, although that's certainly a good argument to make that it's a bad precedent. But from a procedural point of view, within the confines of the Citizen Empowerment Act, if we put this before the voters when we haven't given them enough information for them to know whether or not it's in their best interest, they're going to vote no, and then it's a minimum of 4 years before you can bring them the question again. And then they're not going to trust you 4 years from now because you didn't get it right last time. So you're pretty much killing it. If you don't get it right, you're killing it. And so I don't want that to happen. This $1 million could be a good thing. We discussed other issues with emergency services that I also think would be a good thing, and is the position of some emergency services departments. So I'm sort of still wanting this to happen and go forward. But another thing to remember from a point of view of asking the boards to actually pre-affirm an intention and a target date to put this into the ballot booth is that, as a matter of law, when something is being done that's a government change, we saw this 3 years ago when the fire department first brought the district recommendation. And the reason that the 2 boards were hesitant to move forward and actually suspended their proceedings on the matter is because in order to put a referendum for a change in government structure in the ballot booth, it means that the two boards are telling the public by taking that resolution that they feel that this is in the best interest of everybody in the community. That's going to be in the text of any vote. It's implied, it's in New York state law. That's what you're doing. You're telling the people that you, as the two boards, believe that this is in the best interest of the community. You can't make that recommendation before the math's been done. You can't honestly say that you know that. So it's two kinds of bad precedents to set. And so I guess what I'm thinking, just in conclusion here now, is that since I like the idea of Plan B in theory, pending information being developed, and since neither board could really say that they recommend that we go forward without that information having been developed in the form of a pre-resolution on a referendum, how about why not recommend to the boards that Plan B is the two things we said before. It's legal and it doesn't jeopardize the grant. That's the two things we definitely know. And if there's anybody that doesn't want to be part of fleshing out the details, then I would suggest that those people can, be thanked and go on vacation and have the two boards resolve to fill those seats with people that are full of vigor and don't feel any negativity about what's come up to this point. And let's make this thing real. Let's make this thing really good and real, and then maybe the two boards will want to endorse it.
Can I
Yeah.
say something?
Go.
I think first, it's got to be recognized that there's some really hard feelings, and I think that has to be validated because it's just real, and it's just what it is. And it's sitting at this table, and a lot of people feel it. I think it also has to be validated that there are certain people who just, well, let me put it this way. I came back, 2.5 years ago. As soon as I came in and we started working on this, there were people who did not want this day one, end of story, and did anything they could to stop it from happening. That's okay, that's their right or something, but let's not pretend that there wasn't this push-pull and there wasn't some really nasty vitriolic, things that were going on, and people feeling that the work they were doing was being dismissed. So that's real, and let's acknowledge it, okay? But now, let's put it aside, because for the moment, Steve, you're sitting at this table, and the fact that you and I are sitting here and have been working together is a major accomplishment, okay? The fact that Jason's here today might be a major accomplishment, but I have to ask him a question, then I'll find out if it is or it isn't, okay? So
I just had to walk up the stairs. It wasn't that.
okay, but you can't sat down and stayed, right? Okay, you're here. Okay, so I understand from certain people's perspective, because quite frankly, my attitude, as I said to Sally, I don't want it coming back to the two boards because I don't have the faith in the two boards that we're going to be able to do the work, because I've already lived it through 2.5 years, and I'm not willing to go back to where I was, just like you're not willing to be here, okay? So we have lots of problems, okay, in that sense. So I understand from some of the people on this committee's perspective, they just want to know if they're going to be asked to do the work, and if they should step up to do the work, that there's a real commitment by both boards to do an honest look at what's being done and see if it's an honestly good proposal, whether we agree with it or not, and allow the two boards to vote to put it up. And I think in some ways that's what some people here are saying, is we want to know that if we're going to do the work, that we're going to get a fair shake, and we're not going to be treated, the way we've gotten treated before, because nobody wants to backwalk there again, okay? On the other side, and I'll have to ask this question to you, Jason, okay, because that'll depend on where I'm willing to go in a sense, okay? If I believe that you're truly committed to trying to do the work that needs to be done to try to see if this is a good idea or not, and you're willing to be a part of the process, then there might be people here who are willing to say that I'll take the time to do the work. So let me just step and put a concrete thing on the table, okay? We talk about the finances. I know you think the world of Nancy Bracco, okay, and you trust and respect her, okay? When we did the finance committee stuff, forget about everybody else who was on the committee. I'm just talking about me and Nancy. Nancy had her book, I had my book, okay? And I will say for at least $1 million, there's $600,000 that I will agree with everybody, take it and put it over here, okay? And and which should have never been in the plan in the first place, but that's beside the point. But there was $1 million that I could sit here and say that I felt really confident that number is pretty real, because Nancy sat with her book, I sat with my book. When we discussed things, I would look at Nancy and say, what do you think, Nancy? And she'd go, I could live with that. And I'd go, okay, I can live with that too. And then we would both basically turn around to the committee and say, we're okay here. So there were certain things where I thought we had to put more money in. Nancy said, no, we don't have to. This is why. There were other areas we put more money in. There were other areas where Nancy and I agreed. So I do believe that there's $1 million that we could save through the two committees. That's not to say that there aren't the other things that you talk about, the grants and stuff that we have to weigh against it. I do agree with you, okay? If you were willing, and Steve, I'd be fine if the two of you are willing to sit with me and Nancy, maybe Sally, you were on the committee, and sit and actually go through that stuff and understand the thinking, which we never, as a committee, got the opportunity to present. And the truth is, we came up with our financial stuff, and then immediately we started getting attacked, and we were never able to truly whatever. But if you were willing to sit with me, sit with Nancy, you two, we can go over the numbers. You can say, I think they're all a waste of time, but at least give the time and the consideration to look at the stuff. That's the beginning of the financial thing. Of course, then we can always take it to somebody else to look at a review, but I think, if there's an attempt by the certain people to say, I'm going to do this in a good faith effort to sort of look at this, then I think you might get people who are sitting here who's saying, I don't want to do this anymore, that might say, I'd be willing to continue to work on this and bring something forward. But if this is really all just a shell game, for us to do more work so we can then get attacked or vote no at the end of it, then let's all just quit and go home and let the people petition, and there'll be a vote.
And we talk about 2.5 years, but let's just be clear on this. It's really 5 years for
some of you.
us. It's 2.5 years playing games in the community, but it's 2.5 years that we all worked on this, Steve. So we've already surpassed your
No,
participation.
but like I said, we've all put our lives into volunteering
More is the
volunteers, not
point.
even
The fact of the
any.
Yeah, but you didn't get
matter
trash for your
is
TIC
that
thing.
it's time, if what we're saying is, this is the price one pays for volunteering, then I'm saying, make it time to change that. It doesn't have to be okay that people spend as much time as they're spending to no avail. That does not have to be okay. And it's certainly not beneficial to the community. So, I'm very comforted by what you're saying.
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, don't discount the Fair Weather Report. It was the only functional analysis ever done comparatively on what was actually being done at the governmental level, function by function. And so the starting point is not what happened after we received the report, it's what happened before we received, while the report was being made. And that's, notwithstanding Jason's objections to that report, I think that was a sound
Many of
basis.
which were met, actually.
What?
Many of which were met in the final draft.
But that's the sound basis, and that analysis was not contingent on one plan or another. That analysis was general enough to support any plan. That's the first point. The second point is that we were told when we got this grant to consider options that were not yet available under law but might be made available, and we did that. So dismissing the option that we came up with in this kind of casual way because it was not contemplated by existing law is offensive. Because we actually did what we were asked to do, and then there were public hearings where people alleged, and I was present for them, that we were unrealistic or somehow hadn't met the charge of the committee, where we had actually done what we agreed to do. So that's the second point, and that's I could understand that. I don't feel the same emotional charge on this as perhaps Ellen does, but I have some energy on it. The additional point is that the presumption of the discussion is that this will be evidence-based decision making, but that's not what's happening in the community. What's happening in the community is I know what I want. I know what outcome I want, and therefore I'm going to approach the work with a presumption that I have to prove that that outcome is the desired, is supported. So if you don't want two governments, you approach it that way. If you want two governments to persist, you approach it that way. And in the boards, people are taking that posture. They're not taking a posture, we want to hear what you have to say, we want to hear your analytic, your evidentiary base. They're saying, I don't agree with this and I'm going to find a way to undo it. or I agree with this and I'm gonna find a way to do it, notwithstanding the evidence. So I think that it's naive to believe that we are going to have an evidence-based decision. I think that the delay, if not purposeful, and I'm not convinced that the delay in this matter has not been purposeful in some quarters, not in all quarters, is damaging. And it's damaging because it's hard to persist on a matter over time with no view of when the outcome will occur. What we need to have, and what we need to have in New York generally, and in this process in particular, is some commitment to an outcome.
Yes.
And what this request has been is a commitment to an outcome. Not go back and do more work, and we'll see what we think. Where people are taking positions, they're good. I have no question about the genuinity of their commitment to the community, but they're taking positions based upon a predisposed result. And so why? What's the incentive for me to do more? What's the incentive for anybody to do more? Where I think that the result won't be evidence-based. And I hear assertions in this conversation that are problematic. It does happen to be $1 million, because for this size community, that's the number. It's not a hypothetical number, that's a calculated number.
I agree with that.
There are grants that are potentially foregone by the village, but there was a response to how to get that resolved. Because you can qualify sub-areas of a community for grants. It's harder because you don't have the existing entity, so the data is not collected on the basis of the existing boundaries. You have to re-aggregate the data. So there's a cost, but the cost is not the $600 million grant. The cost is the cost to become qualified.
It is the cost.
So there's there's been analysis, and that question has been addressed in the conversation, but somehow lost in the midst of time. Now, maybe it wasn't convincing, but it wasn't neglected, and it was addressed. So my view is that the question is, will this work? It will work with certain contingencies addressed. If you want to go forward with this, tell us. If you don't want to go forward with this, make a decision and say so, and we'll live. We may not live happily ever after. Well, we'll probably live. So to tell us, study it for an additional undetermined time and be good people, and maybe we'll get around to giving serious attention to it. When the board's changed 6 times, new people come into the room and say, I never heard of this, let's start over, which has been happening every week lately, is unacceptable. It's not in accord with what a reasonable person could expect to as responsive after they volunteered their time.
But I think we've actually found common ground between what you
Thank
said
you.
Before,
and what I said.
Steve, Rick, do you have anything that you want to
Anything to
say
add?
before?
Rick?
I was just gonna say, I do agree though that the committee's been doing this for a while and should make a decision sooner than later.
So
Thanks, Rick.
When Steve has done it.
Yeah, well, I was he jumped in, but I was
I think it'll have
recognizing
some
you.
bearing, so he may want to. I think you and I are actually finding common ground here. You were the one that brought up 2 weeks ago that one of the possibilities of what we could do is what I've been saying, is to advise the boards that we have studied the legal issues, and that this is what can be done, and that this in fact does not jeopardize the grant and all that kind of stuff. If you would like to include a component on that you would like the 2 boards to charge the continued work of the committee with a date certain by which as much data can be analyzed and brought into the process for Plan B by a date certain, I would have no objection to that, as long as that weren't going to take the form of an actual resolution by the 2 boards to pick a referendum date. That's the only part I would fall short of agreeing to. But to name a date and for us to recommend to them that we've studied the legalities of it and that they are in fact able to proceed, and I would be perfectly comfortable with that. And also just there may not even be anybody here at the table besides the 2 of us who know this, but Jason and I once went a considerable amount of time without talking to each other and working with each other. Certainly I've had the same situation with Susan, and yet here we are.
This is the first time you're talking to me.
And here we are, but I haven't been just going on for a few months now. So it's in private and in public. So
Yes.
So here, here we all are sort of ready to do the work as far as I could tell, all willing to be together and work and not be oppositional and do work. And I think that's probably that's a better place than we've been in the whole 2.5 years so far. And so I would like to ask everybody here to feel optimistic about that, not pessimistic. I think we can, so Jason still hasn't responded specifically, despite my whisper to him that to respond to Susan, but I think we can really get somewhere from here.
Well,
Well, why don't we have Jason
I
respond to
think
me?
number
Figure that
one-
out.
Sorry, Chris.
I want Jason to speak and then we'll go.
One is I disagree with everything Jerry said.
What else is new?
I know exactly.
It's the first encouraging remark I've had all night.
The second is
I'm on the right
Ellen.
track.
The second is Ellen. I'm very, very sorry that you feel so battered and bruised by this process.
I think a lot of
I
us
know
do.
the feeling, not from this issue, but from others in 15, 16 years of politics. But let's call a spade here. This group, the group that has been studying and advocating for consolidation, is not an embattled minority fighting the political establishment. For the first 2 years of votes on this, every vote was 9-1 in favor of everything the consolidation. Maybe 9.
Sometimes 8-2. I show you 8-2.
No.
Occasionally 8-2.
It took a year. Jeff started voting against it only after like a year or two. I was the only no vote for over a year, maybe 2. So this is
You
the
didn't
political
join
establishment.
until 3 months.
I mean
From the board table.
from the board table
Oh.
at the joint
Oh.
meetings. Everything that happened, from accepting the report down to the details, to forming the committees, to funding them, it was, I guess, let me be accurate, then 9-1 or 8-2, depending on the vote, but a supermajority. And to be completely honest, I'm here today, but I have absolutely zero confidence. Or I guess let me flip that around. I have 100% confidence that the town and village boards will jointly approve whatever this group says, but with a supermajority on Thursday. And part of my problem with all of that is that I have never been, it took me a long time. I was not opposed to consolidation for the first several years of this. I became opposed to this process, not consolidation as a concept, because of the lack of information that I saw coming out, the inability of me personally to make an informed decision, and the speed at which this was happening with those 9-1 and 8-2 votes. There was, and if people were yelling at, not you, Ellen, because you weren't sitting at the board table, but yelling at the board, who were voting 9-1 and 8-2 in favor of consolidation, it's because the information was not provided. There was questions being asked by very serious people. These were not jokers with torches and pitchforks. This is 2 former deputies mayor, 3 former trustees, 2 former school board presidents, et cetera, several former school board members, people who understand government, were asking very serious questions. And they were ignored, and they were mocked once in a while. Kitty, I believe, mocked KT's answers at one meeting I remember in particular. Hold on, and this is all on the video. So let's be very clear about this. That consolidation is the supermajority position of the joint boards right now, unless the new people are whatever. But.
I just have to. I have to just.
Oh, but let me. Please don't interrupt
Yeah.
yet, because I have to answer your question.
Sure. Thank you.
At this point, no, I would not be willing to sit down, and for 2 reasons. One,
What?
He won't. He's not willing to sit down.
I'm not willing to sit down with Carol, not Carol,
With
your
Nancy.
Carol,
Nancy
and
me.
Susan.
Yeah,
Laws.
okay.
Not even
Because-
me?
Huh?
Not even
Maybe
me.
maybe with you too. But Nancy,
How
no.
about if it's
But let me
Nancy
give you
and-
let me give you my
Okay, we're
reason why.
digressing.
I'm sorry. Let me give you my reasons why. One is this. One is that I'm incredibly busy. I have a lot of irons in the fire, and I have been on that 1 or 2 vote minority for 2 years. I have no expectation of that changing. So my participation in this process is a waste of my time, because I'm never going to be heard. My answers, the questions will never be answered, and I'm personally not willing to do more work on this as the mayor, as a village board member, because by moving this process from this table to that table, really what you're doing is having the 10 elected officials do this work instead of this group, because someone has to do the work. Someone has to plug the numbers into the spreadsheet. Someone has to do all that. Now, when Nancy was, and I asked her specifically about the finance committee that had happened, and because I was upset about some of the numbers, like the stuff that ended up being mistakes, the police and all that.
I said take that out.
Right, but the first draft had all that in there. And so I go into Nancy and say, what the hell is going on? And she says, I was not involved in making any policy discussions. I just helped them make sure the math was right. So to sit down with Nancy, you and Steve at this point, would be to repeat a process that was broken the first time, because Nancy's going to help us do the math. But what are we going to ask her? What are we actually
All
going to
your
be doing?
questions,
no,
that's
time
why
out.
you should
No,
Excuse me,
be part
I'm
of
going to
it.
interrupt this because this is not fruitful. I think there's a lot of revisionist history going on that is just not
Well,
truthful.
and you have your opinions
Just a-
personally,
and,
too.
And Jason, we can agree to disagree, and when we first were elected, and I was elected on a one community party, you said to me you were not in favor of consolidation, and we agreed to disagree.
Until
and
it was,
that,
unless it was proven to
Excuse
work.
me.
That's what.
and
That's
a
the
lot of
issue.
questions that have been asked and have been answered, but the answers just don't want to be accepted by people who are opposed. And one of the questions, and I know you have raised this many times, is about the whole grant, and if we consolidate, we won't get grants. And the answer to that is that even in water and sewer, grants are given to the area, not to the geographic area.
Okay.
They
We
are
would have lost the
given
New York Rising
to.
$3 million.
Excuse me.
That's a fact. We would have lost $3 million on
we're not
the
gonna
New
know.
York
Well, the New
Rising
York- well,
grant.
no,
We
they
would have
actually-
gotten I don't mean the later stuff. I mean, we would have gotten $3 million instead of 6. We know that. We would already be. The reason that the grant money needs to be looked at a little more closely is that if we had followed your if it had turned out the state would allow it, and we had followed this group's recommendation.
I didn't interrupt you.
Oh, you interrupted him.
I
We
know,
would
we
already
weren't
be in
finished,
the
though. I wasn't
hole.
finished.
We would already be in the hole $2 million even after the $1 million grant came in. So we do need to
But
not dismiss that kind of thing. It's real. It's real. Jason has a position and you have a position, but I don't. I keep emphasizing
On
that.
grants,
and I
I
know that Dan
don't.
doesn't.
No.
We need to look at these things.
But Steve, I just have to, what Jason's talking about with water and sewer, okay, and what Sally and him are talking about is one thing, and that's very real, okay? You can't really bring in, I know what you're saying about the New York Rising, but you can't really bring that in because that was a new program that was introduced later, okay? And new programs can be introduced all the time. So you can't, react to, well, now there's a new program and we could have.
I appreciate that, but we should also acknowledge that at least in this case, this one time, we got lucky. We got lucky that the matter had been delayed because we made $3 million on
Let's
the
wait till we
deal.
get awarded, okay? Then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Let's wait till we get awarded.
We-
But could I just respond to
Susan
Jason?
asked Jason
And I
a
wanna
question and he
I
has
just
now
wanna respond to-
answered
I just
it.
want to respond to Jason though, because he can still say no. I just want to answer one thing because I just want to give clarity, okay? And then let's come up with a plan because I think we're all getting crazy,
Cranky.
okay? I just want to say, Nancy, yes, she's right. She didn't do policy per se, okay? What she did though, which is why I asked if you would sit down with us, okay, is when it came to line by line by line, okay, when it came to sidewalks, and I would say to Nancy, okay, we have to add more money in because now we're going to be having to plow the sidewalks up to ShopRite. And Nancy said, this is what we could do, this is the money we have, this is what I think we would need. And I'd say, okay, Nancy, I can buy you a number, okay? When we would talk about the clerk's department, because you have a village clerk, we have a town clerk. Our town clerk does completely different work than your village clerk. So we sat there and said, okay, if we're gonna now have one, a clerk's office, what's the new clerk's department gonna look like and how do we move it around so it shows, the right kind of way, the right kind
So
of.
I'll
let me
meet
just
with
finish.
you just to shorten the meeting.
Okay. Okay.
At least once.
Good
At
faith.
least once.
Good faith.
Say yes.
Okay,
Just
fine.
say
There we go.
yes. He said
Okay.
yes.
But-
And also, I had to use
in
the
good faith,
bathroom really
in good
bad.
faith.
Oh,
I swear to God, I will meet with
But I do-
I'll make sure he brings
I do
good faith. That'll
believe-
be part of my job.
I do believe
I'll probably kill myself now, but that's, anyway.
that
I made
point-
the offer.
the point that Ellen raised, that Jerry also elaborated on, and I also support, and that is, I do not think it wrong or unfair, and I have given a lot of time to this community, Steve, in a lot of different ways, that it is unfair to expect these two boards to make a commitment, and if they wish to ask us to do some of the work, I am certainly willing. But I am not going to sit for 2.5 years arguing with you about grants and everything else. Excuse me, you got your say, I'm gonna have mine. Unless we start having a healthy respect for professional people who have told us things which we choose not to believe, or doubt, or question. That's not how I agree. It is very damaging, and I think unless the joint boards, and I'm not disputing what you're saying about the work that needs to be done, but unless these two boards commit to a seriousness that this community has the right to vote on the issue of one government, I'm not doing any more work.
But again,
Because I think there has to come a time where people make a commitment and then ask other people to join in. I'm perfectly happy to join in and help wherever I can. But I think it is fair to say that we need that commitment, and I'm going to ask if the rest of the committee agrees.
point of information, this is actually part of Robert's Rules of Order. This keeps on happening, and I really need for it to stop happening because it's a separate matter from whether or not the state advised me that it doesn't jeopardize the $1 million. To take this step, if we take this step, if the two boards vote to take this, to recommend to the public that they think this step should be taken, we will not be asking them to take the step to make one government where there were two. We will be asking them to make two governments, just not the same two that they've had up until now. And that's why the whole question has come up about whether we've been seeing advocacy at this table rather than agnostic research. It comes up over and over and over again. By definition, this proposal creates a brand new taxing entity that needs the election of 5 people to sit on it, auditors, but the whole thing, so people here keep using that term. We're gonna ask the people if they want one government, but that's not really the question we're asking them. We're not asking them if we want one government. This proposal will continue the reality of having two governments, just two different ones than the one we have now. And if we're not gonna speak that way honestly to people, then we're propagandizing, not informing. And as much as you resent that you spent 2.5 years doing that, I resented watching the videos for the whole 2.5 years and seeing the kind of messaging that was going on in the conversations. And it's still happening right now.
Our original recommendation, Steve, was not for two governments. We recommended a village
Right, but now you're recommending two governments, and you just said one, so you're using incorrect language.
Well,
We have to
town
stop that.
government
Can I just-
automatically implies.
First, I don't care who, in order to go further with moving down this path of having a consolidated government, at this point, in terms of what we're looking at, the fire question, as Steve said at the very beginning, has always been an issue. We have a situation where the fire department has offered to pay to bring the expert down, to talk to the two boards and the community, to discuss a fire district with the community again, to discuss a fire protection benefit district with the community again, which are our two options if we want to operate as a town. I do think it's a different environment now in terms of how that operates, because you've got the tax cap that the fire department, if it's a district, has to operate under, which I think will make people feel more comfortable about the possibility of considering that. I also learned from a meeting I had, because the fire commissioners came in to talk to me, that even when you create a fire district, you have to have for the first 5 years a village board member and a town board member on as two of the 5 commissioners. That's what I was told.
An appointee, not the
Well,
actual
appointee,
seated
well,
member. That's very
Okay,
different.
Well, that's not what they told me, but we'll have that clarified. I don't, what I'm saying. It's still that there's ways that I think the community can feel more comfortable. What I would like to do is, whether it's this committee or we ask the two boards, I would like for us to offer to take the fire department up on creating this meeting, having this guy come down and talk to us as a community, okay? So at least we have a better understanding of where we go with the fire department, because that is a big issue. The other thing is if we're gonna go down this path, in the Government Reorganization and Empowerment Act, if you're gonna do a consolidation agreement, there are about 9 or 10 questions that have to be answered in order to
got
have a
mine.
plan. So I just think that maybe if we started to focus on, here, Jason, if we started to focus on these specific things, because this is what we're ultimately gonna have to do if we're gonna put a referendum up, if we should agree to put a referendum up. So if we could focus, whether it's us, and we have the board empower us to do this, we start to focus on these questions, because this is ultimately what we're gonna have to deliver.
These are
We
the
work-
9
I
questions
know.
that Peter,
Right, I know that, I understand that,
answered.
I understand that. So maybe it's not that much work because they were answered,
No.
okay? But we sit down, we review it, we come up with it, and ultimately, if it's not a good plan, the boards won't vote to put it up. If the public thinks it's a good plan, they'll petition. But I think we should do the fire thing, and I would like to have this committee be the one who invites the fire department presentation to come down.
That was our
You know,
agreement
I know,
before I
but
ever agreed to
I know
speak
that.
on the
I know, but I'm
topics.
saying, I'm making this as a formal proposal,
Yes.
that I would like to see the efficiency committee right now say, yes, we want to go ahead, we want to invite this guy down, we want to host a meeting, it could be with the 2 boards, you know, and we invite the community, and let's at least have this conversation. Let's see where we sort of feel about this as a conversation, and then simultaneously, we can either ask the 2 boards to empower us to start working on these questions.
I would like
With-
to reverse it. I
Go
would
ahead.
like the empowerment first, and I would like the town
And the-
board and the village board to invite
Fine.
the fire department, Terry, whatever his name is,
Hannigan.
to come and make a presentation to the joint boards, assuring that the joint boards then will be in attendance, and, don't laugh, and that the decision, fire district, fire company, whatever the third option is, that rests with the 2 boards, and they are the 2 agencies that must be most informed. But I'm going to move what Ellen and Jerry said. I have no problem continuing this work, doing the work of where we can, the 9 questions, but I really believe that the 2 boards have to show some seriousness and empower the committee to continue the work, and that the work that the committee does will be given serious consideration.
I
point
just
of
want to
order,
say something
Susan was
about
formulating a proposal, and so you're now making a
I'll
proposal.
rescind my,
on-
I'll rescind my motion.
Okay, I want to.
And I'll second Sally's for purpose of discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say something about what Sally is saying. I think that for me, if the 2 boards are prepared to move on the fire department question, issue, whatever, and take action on that. So I don't know, is it appropriate to ask, since we know that the fire question is
A
a
biggie.
pivotal question in anything that goes forward, for me, if the
2 boards.
if the 2 boards, thank you, if the 2 boards move in a timely fashion to proceed with this, and if, as a result of this information, we may find that the 2 boards are unwilling to commit anything further because they're unwilling to accept these 2 possible other alternatives, then we don't have to go any further.
Yes,
with
we've
this.
discussed, you're right.
If the 2 boards, if the 2
Said
boards
that 3
act
meetings ago.
expeditiously to answer the fire question, then I would be more than happy to continue working and to work towards answering these questions.
I would
I'm
totally
not
support that.
unhappy about
As
the
a middle ground
possibility.
that shows their, I totally support what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
unhappy at the possibility that a date for a referendum would not be set. I need a show of goodwill, good faith, and administrative commitment to be willing to move forward. This would be a fine substitute for me.
So the resolution is, I'll move the following resolution, that the committee has investigated, according to the charge given, that the committee has investigated Plan B and determined that it is viable is viable, and further has determined that there are a number of open questions regarding the community's acting upon Plan B, to wit, and then we'll list the open questions. And further recommends that, and further resolves and recommends that the two boards invite, as a first step in furthering this matter, invite the authorities on alternatives for delivery of fire services, to make presentations to the boards about options in a timely fashion. So
I'll
3
second
elements.
Okay, but before, you gotta withdraw your motion.
I'm going to withdraw mine
And
because,
I seconded hers, so I'll substitute, whatever the word is.
but that is
you
the
know.
way to do it. And
Okay.
then this
Okay, well, I'll
committee
second
has
Jerry's.
fulfilled its.
I'm seconding
We're
Jerry's.
so good at Roberts, man, all of us after all these years.
Did you get,
Can we
did
actually
you
read
get
that
the
back?
language of?
I'm gonna have to get,
Yeah.
you'll have to forgive me, I'll have to, when I type this up, take the exact, because we can't do it again, but let me just give you what I gathered.
Because it's too long. I don't
Right.
have the specifics that Ellen pointed out of the conditions that have to be met. But there are 3 elements. One, we're recommending, we found that Plan B is viable. That to affect Plan B, there are certain further questions that have to be examined. And that as a first step in examining these questions, we recommend that the boards take timely action to invite, at the expense of the fire department, to invite experts to explore the alternatives for organizing the delivery of fire services. And I suppose we can ask, I don't know if you agree to this, that indicate as to us following their hearing these alternatives, whether they think it desirable to proceed
Right.
towards consolidation.
And then,
Towards a
if
vote
I
on
may
consolidation.
amend that,
Towards a vote.
If the two boards were to decide that one of the 2 fire district options available was desirable and to express that, wouldn't that de facto be their endorsement that this process is moving
Yes.
forward?
But I do think,
But the
I haven't got
language is-
I haven't got a fully formed conclusion on this, but I think it would be nice for them to say, thank you for doing the work, we looked into this, we're serious about it, and we want to go forward in a direct way, rather than in a way that we might deduce but is not specified, you know. Just
Go
say
forward
it.
on other questions.
It would be nice to hear that.
Okay.
and moreover, if you're willing to accept the amendment, that once the 2 boards have made a decision regarding that, and should it be that they find one of those alternatives reasonable and possible, to then ask this committee to reconvene to do some of the work that the 2 boards.
Well, that's
Well,
what I
that's-
mean by
yeah,
the last
right.
sentence.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think
You know, A through M, the board has to require that A through M be fulfilled, whether
Yeah,
they take it
absolutely.
on, whether they take it on themselves,
We
or
know
whether
that.
they
Well,
send it
Jerry-
back to
we know
us.
that.
Jerry's motion said.
So, and
That may even
that's
be
what
a-
I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
That's what
Tell
Jerry's-
Tell us you want to do this, you
Right.
don't want to go further, or tell us that you don't, but take a look at this, because if this is a deal breaker, then let's know that.
Then
By
we'll
the
know.
way, I think it's really interesting and challenging to try to understand how a 2% cap would work on an entity that never taxed.
Well, maybe once they get a stat.
But it does, but it kind of works like the transfer of assets, right? It does have a budget, it does have its
Well,
actual
that-
own
but-
line, and it has been
but
taxed.
It'd be sort of interesting to find that out.
It has been taxed at the town level through the, fire protection
I said a
district that
clarifying
exists.
All I know is
Yeah.
Jerry, I was told that
That's
we should.
Okay, we've got a motion on the
Well, these guys.
floor.
you want
It's
to-
Well,
been
discussion
seconded.
is still-
Just- Hold on. It's been seconded.
Yes.
Dan, would you like to comment, and Carol and anybody else, on the motion?
Yeah, the discussion about having to see if the board is interested in having a vote on that. When we're talking about a vote, are you setting a special referendum? Are we talking about a November
We've got
referendum,
there.
or are we just simply
I made no
saying that?
reference- I made no
We made
reference to a
No
referendum.
So the
referendum.
commitment is just saying that we want to eventually be able to have the public
I
vote.
made no reference to a referendum.
No.
Okay, so that was out of the motion.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
To avoid that tangle.
Okay.
Yes, it was totally out of
All right.
No, I
Just-
recorded
Do you
that, there's no
want
referendum
Steve
recorded
to
here, I understood your
Reread
intent.
what the motion is.
No, I just wanted to
in
clarify that single point.
No.
We're-
Okay.
I get it.
I understood your intent, that's how
Okay.
I recorded it, so.
Yeah, but
Because he
didn't.
never used
So
the
he
word
was trying to
referendum.
clarify.
I thought that was what I suggested an hour and a half ago.
It was.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what you said. It took me an hour and a half.
Jason?
May I-
Steve, any more?
Alan had a point of information which should supersede.
No, I was saying that
No,
Dan was
she was
asking
pointing
for a
that
point of
Dan did.
information. Thank you, Jason. I just want to say something. Jason, speaking to you. However, no, I'll say it a different way. I am often very impressed with the creativity that you bring to ideas and the perspective that you bring. I have also been very impressed with the way you've handled a number of sticky issues at recent board meetings.
I hear a big butt coming down.
No. What you hear
Thank
is a
you very
large
much.
and, not a big but. To that end, I'm asking you, as a member of this board, group.
Committee,
Thank you. More so as a resident of this village, I'm asking you to please join us, to please speak to your objections with the open mind that I've seen you already doing, and to make what we're talking about better for the doing of it. Whatever the it is, I hope that you will do that.
I'm already meeting with Susan and Steve.
Yeah.
Point of
well,
information,
I hope
this is
it'll be
urgent.
more
We'll see how
than-
well it goes.
I want you to know, I hope it will be more than one time. I was very glad to see you here,
Thank you.
and I think you have an awful lot to add.
Thank you so much, Alan.
yes.
At exactly 6:45, I have to go downstairs for my annual physical, without which I cannot continue to serve you in my other capacity. And so therefore, if we can bring
We're-
this to a vote,
we are going to
because
speak.
anything that needs to be recorded after 6:45, I'll have to transfer to someone else to record.
I
I'd
only
really
have-
like to see this.
I only have one question.
Yeah, I'm going around.
I'm ready to vote.
He made the motion.
Okay.
My only
But that
question
doesn't mean he
is,
doesn't have a point of
my
clarification.
only question is-
Yes,
do Jason, Steve, and I need to meet before we have the fire department conversation, or can we
No,
wait
it's a
until
whole
after
separate
that?
matter, and certainly
Okay,
after,
I'm
because if
teasing,
they all
okay.
say no, then,
Yeah, right,
you know,
exactly.
then there's no point,
Right.
so no.
so
Okay,
we
so I'm teasing,
do
kidding.
understand the motion,
Yep.
we understand, okay,
Yep.
and there is a commitment to get a date and get this going. Any other points? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll vote aye. I'll vote aye.
Thank you,
Yes.
Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a
I haven't
unanimous,
been thanked for a vote.
that is a unanimous decision, and now, I would suggest that we're gonna send our pros and cons
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Dan,
You want me to just
and
put
he-
this into a
and
document?
he
Why
will,
don't you do that?
Giselle,
Here's the pros and cons, please.
okay, we are going to do, okay, the pros and cons, I will send forward you mine.
Okay.
I'll get you my name to him.
We're all going to commit by the end of this week to send our pros for consolidation, cons, and by cons, that can be either issues that you believe are
That's the old.
hot button issues that need to be addressed, or real cons that you think people strongly feel that need to be addressed. And they are all to go to Dan, he will compile the list, he will ship it out to all of us. We will not meet again, we will not meet again until we have a decision, until we have the presentation and an understanding of the two boards' position on the fire department, fire, whatever the second is, or fire company.
Okay. So now if I can ask if it's okay, what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, Jason, is add this to the agenda for Thursday night, since we're getting together, because all we're doing is actually trying to move something forward. Having the fire department try to find out when this guy might be available, so we could potentially set the meeting, and just.
Yeah,
as-
sure. Add it to the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Question for everybody before, since we're about to adjourn. While it's obviously possible for me to transmit what just happened here downstairs in a colloquial fashion, as we discussed from the beginning when we first brought this up, what's really needed, especially if the two boards are meeting this week, or
Thursday.
just together or separately, is you need to do it, formally from your positions. I mean, I'll pass along if this happened,
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah.
you need to adopt an agenda item on Thursday, and then you need to actually communicate that in writing to Kevin
Well,
and
that's okay,
Bill,
I can
because
stop down.
that's how it needs.
I can stop or whatever. Well, I
To be
mean,
done.
they've
I'd like
already,
to see
I
the
ought-
language you end up with.
What's that?
I'd like to see language that you end up with on the resolution, so just look.
Absolutely.
What are you saying, Dean?
Would anybody object to my moving to authorize Steve to ask Kevin and Bill to be in touch with Terry to find suitable dates when he is available to come, rather than our imposing upon him? He is doing,
Yeah.
and then transmit that to Jason and Susan so that on Thursday night, we can set the date.
If you can
Okay.
move that quickly
Yeah,
on it,
yeah,
but so
yeah.
then, yeah, I
Everybody
mean, obviously I'm
agree to
going
this?
down there right now. I don't know if Kevin will be down
We
there, but I
agree?
will.
yes,
Informal is fine.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
go to it, Steve.
Okay.
Okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
I am asking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
I know you all want to hang out some more, but guess what?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All of you policymakers should come downstairs and see